What's up guys, Maelstrom here. If you enjoyed then like, subscribe and leave a comment so I can keep on making these awesome videos for you guys. Without further ado, let's begin. Naruto Uzumaki groaned as he sat up. He used his right hand and smashed his toad-shaped alarm clock that was blinking the time in its neon orange lights. He let out a sigh as he saw the time. 6:30. He got off his bed and stretched. He then looked around his messy room and smiled. Today was the day. Ladies and gentlemen, today wasn't any random day, no, today was the day Naruto Uzumaki took his training seriously. Not more than 6 hours ago he had defeated a Chunin from stealing a scroll that belonged to the Hokage. Konoha's forbidden scroll filled with thousands on top of thousands of jutsu, all either S-classed, A-classed or B-classed kinjutsu that were powerful and most likely deadly. Naruto had had a long talk with the Sandaime Hokage yesterday, and through some long discussion the Sandaime Hokage had convinced Naruto to eat healthier. Read, forced. They also had a long argument over what Naruto wore. The Hokage had explained that orange could have gotten him killed during a mission. And when all else failed, Hiruzen told Naruto he would ban orange from Konoha. Read, threatened. Then there was the fact that Naruto had no training in anything whatsoever. The only thing he was good in was stealth, due to his limitless hours upon hours of outrunning and hiding from Anbu after pulling pranks. Naruto grumbled as he remembered why he had to wake up at this kami-forsaken hour. He grumbled and took out one of his rusty and dull kunai. Using the dull edge he pried open a loose floorboard. Once the floorboard was discarded he took out a box that was underneath. The box was 12 inches in length, 6 inches in width and 8 inches in height. It had a lock on it. Naruto got up and ran into his bathroom. He removed the top of the toilet where a key was hidden next to the pump. He smirked as he took the key and placed the top back on. He then went back to the chest and slipped the key in. It opened with a click. Inside the chest was some money, some cup ramen, medical supplies, and surprisingly clothes, that weren't orange. He took everything out and placed it onto his bed. He went into the kitchen and brought back out some newly purchased ramen and placed it into the box. He locked it back and placed it back within the floorboard. He took a hammer and some nails and minutes later the floorboard was back to its normal leverage, mostly. He took off his jumpsuit and went into the shower. 10 minutes later he came back out with a towel wrapped around his waist. He quickly brushed his teeth and went back into his room. Once in his room he slipped on his boxers, which was orange with green toads on it. He slipped on the clothes he had in the box and wrapped some bandages around him. The clothes consisted of a black onesie that was tight but not too tight as to look like those green freaks of nature he had seen. It was slightly baggy. It also had a hoodie which obstructed his features well. His blonde hair, blue eyes, and 3 whisker marks per cheek were not seen. The bandages were wrapped around both of his shins, on his right thigh where a kunai and Shoryuken pouch was. There were also bandages around his forearms. A white Konohagaku relief symbol was on his chest while the Uzumaki clan insignia was on both his left shoulder while a strange insignia was on his right shoulder. The sign on his right shoulder was a black line in a horizontal direction, it had a black line in the middle facing vertically. On either end of the horizontal line was strange symbols seemingly repelling each other. The Senju clan insignia. Unfortunately or fortunately, how you look at it, Naruto knew not what it was. He shrugged it off and decided to ask the Hokage about it when he went. He slipped on his black shinobi sandals and his blue-clothed headband, deciding to change it to black later on. He then slipped the money in his pocket and left via the window, but not before leaving some shadow clones to clean up the place. Today was going to be a long day. He just knew it. Hokage's office, Hokage Tower. He pushed open the Hokage's double doors without even knocking, rinsed the old man engrossed in reading his perverted orange book. That's when he got a malicious idea. And it was perfect, seeing as Hiruzen hadn't sensed his entry. Sexy jutsu. He thought, and in a small cloud of smoke a new figure stood there. This was a girl, no, a young woman. She was about the age of 16, had size DD size breasts and was naked, her innocence and assets protected by floating clouds of smoke. Hokage-sama. She breathed out in a seductive tone. Hiruzen just glanced at her and was immediately KO'd with blood pouring down her nose like the falls at Takigakure. Minutes later Hiruzen woke up with a groan. He opened an eye to see Naruto reading his book. Hiruzen snatched the book out of his hand and glared at the young boy. "This is not for children your age," Hiruzen stated as he placed the book away. Naruto sighed and reclined in his seat as he placed his hands behind his head. "What's this sign on the clothes you gave me?" Naruto said, indicating to his shoulder. It was the truth. Hiruzen had given him the clothes when he was 8, stating that he could only wear it when he became a shinobi. "Did anyone notice?" Hiruzen asked, not even answering his question. When Naruto shook his head he continued. "Good, I don't want the village to know just yet." Hiruzen explained. "What is it, old man?" "Your clan insignia," Hiruzen said with a sigh. "You are from 2 shinobi clans, the Uzumaki clan and the Senju clan," he explained and smirked at Naruto's gaping face. "T2 shinobi clans?" he asked and Hiruzen nodded. "Am I the last of both?" Hiruzen's face fell as this was a question he wanted to avoid. "Come on, would you want to tell an orphan that his only known living relative wants nothing to do with him?" "No," Hiruzen said, and Naruto jumped in his seat, pumping his fist in the air. He then went on to ask question on top of question, getting Hiruzen irritated. "Enough!" The silence that filled the room after that was deafening. Naruto looked at Hiruzen with shock written all over his face as he saw a lone tear escape the Hokage's eyes. "Sorry," Naruto apologized. "Can you please tell me about them?" "Sure," Hiruzen said with a small smile. "There are a few Uzumakis scattered across the elemental nations, and there is one Senju alive," he stated, and Naruto was listening with rapt attention. "One more Senju?" he muttered under his breath. "Where is he?" Hiruzen sighed. "She wants nothing to do with you," Hiruzen said and watched as Naruto's face fell. He then noticed Naruto was crying and walked over to him. "She has a good reason," he said, placing a hand on his shoulder. "What is it?" "Do you remember the Yondaime Hokage?" Hiruzen asked and received a nod from Naruto. "She was his mother. She blamed you for killing him because he risked his life to seal the 9 tails in you, but that wasn't all," Hiruzen said, and Naruto turned to him, his eyes red from crying. "Your mother was like a daughter to her." Those words stopped Naruto's tears dead in their tracks as his wide blue and red eyes stared up at his grandfather figure. Shock evident in his features. My mother," he stuttered, and Hiruzen nodded as he went back to his desk. He opened a drawer and pulled out a picture of a busted blonde woman and a red-haired woman with a round face and long hair. He handed it to Naruto. "The redhead is your mother, Kushina Uzumaki, the woman is Tsunade Senju, they were like mother and daughter, but," he said, making Naruto look at him. "Your mother was the previous Jinchuriki of the 9 tails, and during childbirth the seal that keeps the fox at bay weakened severely. Your father tried desperately to hold it back, but he failed, resulting in the Yondaime risking his life." "So?" he said, making Hiruzen inspect him closer. "She blames me for being born?" he asked and watched as Hiruzen nodded glumly, making Naruto smirk, which shocked the shit out of Hiruzen. "What are you smirking about? I'll just have to prove to her that I wasn't a mistake and that I'll live up to Bikao-chan's and Tio-Yu-san's legacy," he said with a grin as he fist pumped into the air. Hiruzen smiled and thanked Kami that Naruto didn't ask who his father was. "Who was my father?" Hiruzen's face turned from one of happiness to one of sadness immediately. "I am not at liberty to tell you, however, I will make it known that you are the last member of one of Konoha's founding clans in the village," he said, and Naruto's jaw dropped. "Look, old man, I'll be back, I have a lot of studying to do, and don't know anything about either of my clans, and I'm going to find out everything I can about my mother and Tsunade-san Tobia," he exclaimed as he turned around and froze in his tracks. "What is it?" I don't think I have enough money to buy what I need, he said, and deflated, to which Hiruzen chuckled. Just go, I transferred quarter of the Senju clan's money into your account while you have all of your mother's money, Hiruzen said, and Naruto's mood returned to eccentric. By the way, I'll be back to find out what I can about my mother from you, he said with narrowed eyes as he left through the window. Hiruzen chuckled and hoped Naruto would never leave via the window again. He did not want another coming of Kushina or Jiraiya. Oh, the pain, it would definitely kill him. He sighed once again as he assembled some ANBU to gather the council in 2 hours. He then pulled back out his Ika Ika book and began reading. Perverted giggles follows suit soon afterwards. Library, Konohagakure. Naruto entered the library with his and waved to the library. It was funny how the librarian was one of the only few people who actually didn't want to rip his guts out. She flashed him a smile, then noticed the Senju logo and called him over. Yes? He asked. I see Hokage-sama told you about your clan, she said, shocking Naruto. Before you ask, I knew, as I was good friends with your mother and father, she said, and Naruto perked up at that. Can you tell me about my father, please? The old man only told me about my mother, he begged, and the woman drew in a breath and patted Naruto on his head. Sorry Naruto-kun, no can do, Hiruzen-sama would have my head, she told him. He pouted. Go and get what you need, I'll personally check you out, she urged. He pouted but nodded and dashed to go search the library. 10 minutes later he returned with 11 books. 2 on chakra control, 1 on the elements of ninjutsu, 2 on the history of Konoha, 1 on the history of the Uzumaki clan, 1 on the Senju clan, 1 on the basics of a ninja, 1 on how to properly throw weapons, the last 2 were on Fuinjutsu and Kenjutsu. In the talk the previous night/morning, the Hokage had practically ordered him to buy these as it was in relation to one of his clans. The librarian sighed and checked up on the books. Would you like to buy or rent them? She asked, and Naruto's jaw dropped. I can buy books from the library, he asked, and she sighed. Once it isn't on the history of shinobis themselves, she said with a shrug. Give me a minute, he said, and disappeared into the back of the library. He came back out with a smaller orange-covered book. She saw the book and glared at it. Naruto chuckled nervously as she rang him up, all the while glaring at him. She sealed all of the contents in a scroll and let out a long-drawn sigh. If Kushina finds out that I let her son buy that perverted filth, she'd kill me, she muttered under her breath, but Naruto heard her and wondered how dangerous his mother was. He waved goodbye and left. Ninja store, Konohagakure. Naruto entered the ninja store to see a young girl with 2 buns in her head. She had on a Link Chinese-style shirt and Trian ninja pants. Naruto walked up and touched her shoulder. Excuse, he said meekly, hoping she wouldn't kick him out of the store. She turned around to face him and smiled. Kawaii, she exclaimed, touching his whisker marks, making him blush. She restrained herself from tackling him and playing with his whisker marks and cleared her throat with an embarrassed blush. Hi, I'm Tenten, what can I do you for? She asked with stars in her eyes. I was wondering if I could buy some ninja equipment, he answered, and she nodded happily. Sure, you can buy anything once you have the money for it, so what would you like? She asked. Can I have an order of 2,000 white kunao? I want them slightly shorter than the others with red wrappings around the handle, 2006 bladed shuriken, some paper bombs, smoke bombs, flash bombs, some chakra weights, 100 meters in chakra wire, and I would also like some clothes, he answered. She eyes him up and down. What's with the weird kunao and shuriken? I was just thinking of something different, I want to be like the Yandere, he exclaimed. Well, you can have everything now and return for the weapons later, but you will need to tell me what kind of clothes you want, she explained, and he nodded in understanding. He explained in fine detail what kind of clothes he wanted and the 2 clan signs on the shoulders. He paid for it up front and left with everything except the clothes and weapons, as the weapons needed to be made and the clothes needed the insignias sewn on. She placed everything else in a scroll and told him to return in 2 days, to which he nodded. As soon as he walked, he bumped into an ANBU who told him Hiruzen requested his presence. He nodded and the ANBU placed his hand on Naruto's shoulder and disappeared with him. Earlier, Konohagakure Council Room. Hiruzen smiled as the last of his council arrived, and on time at that. He cleared his throat as he eyes each and every one of them carefully. All of them paid their full attention. To the left of the table was the clan heads of the following clans: Hyuga, Inyazuka, Abarame, Yamanaka, Amemiki, Nara, and the empty spot for the Senju and Uchiha. To his right were 8 civilians that made up the civilian council, and at the other end of the table was his longtime rival and 2 old teammates. "You were all summoned here for a reason," Hiruzen stated. "What's the reason?" a civilian asked, making everyone's sweat drop like literally. Was he that stupid? "The reason is to discuss the future of the Senju clan," he said, and all heads shot to him. He inwardly smirked at the shocked face on Danzo. "Do tell." Danzo responded almost instantly. "We have had the second heir for the Senju clan among us for 12 years. He said, shocking them further. "Due to his parents' request, his heritage was kept secret until recently, and before you decide to do anything in order to stop me from making my decision, I will personally deal with you." All of them shuddered at that, but out of all of them only one man had it all figured it out, as he let out a chuckle. All heads turned to him. Shikaku Nara. "What's wrong, Shikaku?" his friend, Choza Akimichi, asked. "It's troublesome," he said, making everyone groan at his laziness. "It's been right under our noses since the beginning. I'm surprised no one else figured it out," he said, and Hiruzen smirked slightly. "Who is it?" Danzo asked, only to be met with a chuckle from Hiruzen. Ma Danzo, he'll be here shortly, I sent an ANBU for him," Hiruzen said. Danzo leaned back in his chair and sighed. "Fine then. I have already made the necessary arrangements. He will be moved into the Senju compound and have access to 1/4 of the Senju clan funds, as he is not the first heir," he said. The other nodded. "So he's a good shinobi, we should have our best jonin train him alongside Sasuke," Mabuki said, and was shocked at the cold chuckle Hiruzen let out. They turned to him. "When he gets here we'll make our decision," Hiruzen said, and the others nodded. 5 minutes later there was a shunshin, and an ANBU appeared with a figure that made everyone's eyes, except Shikaku's, grow wide. "Ladies and gentlemen," Hiruzen began with a chuckle. "I present to you, Naruto Uzumaki Senju. How can you possibly associate this filth with one of Konoha's founding clans?" a civilian asked, jumping up and pointing an accusing finger at Naruto, who groaned. The other civilians began to argue with Hiruzen, saying how either, the demon should not be associated with the Senju clan, and it's a lie, he's a demon. Truth be told, Naruto was getting annoyed and sighed. He turned to Hiruzen, who seemed to be almost on the brink of a mental breakdown. Naruto cleared his throat. They still began to quarrel. The shinobi sighed, and the elders were simply staring at him. He blushed from the attention and passed a hand through his blonde locks. "Honorable Council," he said. No answer. A tick mark appeared on his forehead in anger from being ignored. He glanced at Hiruzen, who was just resting his head in his arm that was propped by his elbow. "Enough!" Naruto yelled, silencing the council. They turned to him and glared, making him sweat a little. He was about to apologize when Hiruzen spoke up. "Thank you, Naruto," Hiruzen said, then turned to the council, all of whom stared right back at him with disdain. The shinobi were at least reasonable with the situation, while he felt Danzo and his teammates would snap at any minute. Hiruzen gave a nod of his head, signaling them to begin their question in an orderly fashion and don't ask random shit. The first civilian to speak was a pink-haired woman. "Hokage-sama, I am sure, the rest of the council like myself wishes for proof, particularly a blood test," she said, and Hiruzen turned to Naruto and let out a chuckle. Hiruzen took out a scroll from his Hokage robes and unsealed the contents. Out came a file. Inside the folder was one sheet of paper. It was a blood test. He smirked as he passed it around. It lingered by his teammates and rival longer that tells others, but he made no comment. Once the file had returned to its confines in the scroll, Hiruzen placed it back into his pocket and cleared his throat. He took a sip of his water and turned to Naruto. A blood test was done with blood from my past student, Tsunade Senju and Naruto-kun. Hiruzen stated. It was determined that he is either a cousin or first cousin. So, who are his parents? Koharu Udadan asked. Naruto's attention was now fully on Hiruzen, whose eyes lazily gazed towards Naruto, and then he smirked. His mother was Kushina Uzumaki and his father was, sorry Naruto, I'm not telling you. Hiruzen said, making Naruto and the rest of the council face fault. I don't understand, Hokage-sama. Hayashi said with a sweat drop. Well, Naruto is a smart boy. Hiruzen explained. I want him to figure out who his father is by himself. Naruto groaned and placed a hand on his chin and began to think. Hiruzen snickered, then noticed that one of the clan heads was eyeing Naruto carefully. The man watched Hiruzen, then glanced to the picture of the Yondaime in the corner of the room. Hiruzen only gave a slight nod. The man smirked, rather lazily I might add. He reclined in his chair and gazed at Naruto. Naruto threw his hands up in frustrating. Hiruzen chuckled at the scene. Please tell me, old man. Naruto pleaded, but Hiruzen only shook his head. Naruto grumbled something incoherent and then turned to look at the council, then back at the Hokage. Can we get back on track here? I have a lot of training to do. Naruto said, a little irritated. Well, there's nothing much more to say. An ANBU will meet you later tonight to move your things into the Senju compound. Hiruzen told him. Naruto sighed and pointed to the door, asking if he could go. Hiruzen nodded and Naruto turned and off, rather irritated and confused as to why Hiruzen wouldn't just tell him who his father was. Damn! He had a lot of research to do. Later, Training Ground 2, Konohagakure. Naruto stretched and worked out some kinks in his back and neck. He sighed as he sat cross-legged in the center of the clearing and lay back on his back, taking in the fresh air. He took in his surroundings of the training ground and smiled. It had a waterfall behind him. He was surrounded by lush trees and a wooden stump in the middle of the grounds. He let out another sigh as he stood up and unsealed the contents of his scroll, only to hear his stomach growl. He made 2 clones and sent them for ramen. He took up the first book he saw, which happened to be a book on chakra control, and began to read. But, before he could start, his stomach growled again, making him punch it. He sighed and began to read. Chapter 1, Basics of Chakra. Chakra is the power that shinobis use to do various nin, gen, tai, kin, ken, fon, bo and boku jutsu. Each jutsu uses some form of chakra for the various forms and / or activities. Ninjutsu, ninjutsu or ninja techniques is the ability to incorporate chakra into techniques. There are 5 elements that ninjutsu can be derived from: fire, wind, lightning, earth and water. These are called affinities. They can be tested by chakra paper. Affinities also have betters and leaders. Fire is stronger than wind, which is stronger than lightning, lightning is stronger than earth, and earth is stronger than water. Genjutsu, genjutsu or illusionary techniques is the ability to trap people in fake worlds. Genjutsu requires good stealth, a lot of chakra control and small chakra reserves. There are many ways to do genjutsus. The Sharingan is able to cast and break genjutsu. Genjutsu can also be cast by hand seals. Genjutsu can be broken by 3 means: disrupting chakra flow, forcing chakra into the target, and pain. Taijutsu, taijutsu or body techniques is the ability to fight hand-to-hand combats. Chakra can also be incorporated into this type of fighting by using the 5 elements. You can add any elements into a punch or kick to increase the effect of the hit, causing more damage. Kinjutsu, kinjutsu or forbidden techniques are techniques that are not open to the public. Only certain shinobis can have access to forbidden techniques, as some cause harm to both the user and the victim. Certain kinjutsus can kill the user and target, cause internal or external damage to the user while harming the target, and some can cause mental breakdowns from overuse. Kenjutsu or sword techniques are techniques that requires a sword. Chakra can be mixed with the slices and dices of a sword to add extra effect and sharpness to the blade, making it easier to kill. Swords are to be taken care of and kept in pristine condition in order to avoid rust or dents of the blade. Fuinjutsu or sealing techniques are when paper and sealing ink is used to form a variety of seals for different purposes. There are 50 sealing levels. A seal's difficulty is based on the level. It can also be removed by a sealing practitioner of a higher level. Bojutsu or staff techniques is the ability to use staffs to a great proportion. Chakra can be added to the swings of a staff just like a sword, but the damage would be less because swords are sharp and staffs are not. Bokujutsu or weapon techniques is the ability to throw countless of weapons easily and without too many complications. Bokujutsu practitioners can also be skilled in Ken and Bojutsu, as those are forms of weapons. Chakra can be used to control weapons with chakra wire. Naruto groaned as he finished the first page of the book. It was easy enough to understand, but he only had a month and he could read out those entire books in a month. He was about to continue when he froze. He looked around and raised a brow. He just had a feeling he was in hot water. He turned to his left when he was a wet clone running with 2 bowls of ramen. What happened? Naruto asked, standing up. The clone placed the ramen takeout bowls on the ground and began to pant with hands on knees. He then looked the original dead in the eye. We were running through Konoha when a civilian tripped the other clone, all the ramen spilled and I was only able to save 2 bowls. It answered with a pant. Shadow clones get tired? Naruto asked, and the clone stopped dead in its tracks as well. It scratched its head and looked around sheepishly. It turned to the original to see him sweating madly. It's because you're sweating, we feel what you feel, I think. It is explained, and Naruto passed his palm on his forehead to see he was indeed sweating. He made another clone and sent it into the trees to play rock paper scissors with the other. He told them to play until one wins, then disperse. They nodded and left. 2 minutes later Naruto found out the new clone had lost after 6 drawn games, which made Naruto get a wicked smirk. He filled the training grounds with clones. It was at least 500 clones. I want all of you to break into groups of 100. Naruto explained, and they did so. He made 5 more clones and had each stand in front of a group. You will all do what the leader says and I will tell you when to disperse as to not kill me. Naruto said, remembering the phrase about mental breakdowns. Naruto had a short conversation with the clones and had decided that 2 from each group would read out the books except his Ika while the others practiced either chakra control, Fuinjutsu, Taijutsu, Kenjutsu katas with sticks and meditating. He was only doing the last one because of what Hiruzen had told him about meditation was a good way to clear your mind. So Naruto ate his 2 bowls of ramen and waited for the next 8 hours to pass. Meanwhile, Hokage's office, Hokage Tower. A figure jumped through one of the many windows in the Hokage's office. He glanced around to see the Hokage reading an orange-covered book, which made him let out a perverted giggle, breaking Hiruzen's train of thought. Ah, hello Jiraiya-kun. Hiruzen said as he placed the book away and leaned forward to talk to his old student. Jiraiya was a tall man with waist-length, spiky white hair usually tied back into a ponytail, with 2 shoulder-length bangs that framed both sides of his face. He also had red lines that ran down from his eyes and wore a horned forehead protector with the kanji for oil, Abara, which denotes his affiliation with Mount Meiboku. He also had a noticeable wart on the left side of his nose. Jiraiya wore a green short shirt kimono and matching pants, under which he wore mesh armor that showed out of the sleeves and legs of his outfit. His outfit was completed with hand guards, a simple black belt, traditional Japanese geta, wooden sandals, a red haori with 2 simple yellow circles on each side, and a scroll on his back. He also had a tattoo in his left palm which resembles one that Gamma has in his as well. He sighed. He slipped a paper to Hiruzen. Hiruzen read over its contents and let out a low growl. It seemed his evil student had been continuing his experiments, even after fleeing Konoha. Anything new you want to fill me in on? Jiraiya asked. He did this every time he came. He would report to Hiruzen, ask about Naruto and then leave for another 3 years. Well, Hiruzen stated with a sigh. He knows about Kushina, his Senjou lineage, and is currently trying to guess who his father is because I refuse to tell him. Hiruzen and chuckled at the last part. He then noticed the distant look on Jiraiya's face. Hiruzen let a small smile grace his lips as he knew what Jiraiya was thinking. I know what you're thinking, he said, and Jiraiya turned to him with a humph. You never cease to amaze me, do you, sensei? Jiraiya asked, and Hiruzen could only shrug. You can do it if you want, however. Hiruzen stated with Jiraiya's eyes on him. You have to keep running the spy network. Jiraiya took the thought into his mind. Could he do both? Very well, sensei, I will be leaving for the next 2 weeks, then I will return and take up the brat as my apprentice. Jiraiya said as he walked over to the windowsill. Hiruzen nodded and Jiraiya was gone into the night. Hiruzen let out a harsh breath. The civilian council was going to have a cow. 8 hours later, Yamanaka residence, Konohagakure. Naruto smiled as he rang the doorbell for the Yamanaka residence. The house wasn't too big nor too small. It was just enough for a shinobi clan with their numbers. Naruto was dressed casually in a black muscle t-shirt and black jeans with his forehead protector around his arm. It wasn't a necessity, but he felt naked without it. He had received a message from a Yamanaka stating that Inoichi, the clan, had requested his presence. As the door opened, Naruto came face to face with a familiar female. She had her platinum blonde hair in a high ponytail with bangs covering the right side of her face. She wore a purple t-shirt that went midriff and purple jeans, which Naruto found rather amusing. Naruto? She asked with a raised eyebrow, then noticed that on his arm was the Senjou clan insignia, making her jaw drop to the ground then come back up. Hi Ino, he said casually with his eyes on her. She was taller than him by about an inch or two, but her frame was rather petite, except for her assets of course that printed it in the shirt she wore. He blushed as he observed her, but luckily for him she didn't notice. You're the Senjou clan heir? She asked, and Naruto only nodded his head. He was about to speak, but she stopped him. Does that mean you are noble and have a lot of money? She asked, squealing slightly. Yes, he admitted, and she turned and gestured for him to walk in. Please don't make a big deal out of it, he pleaded, and she only nodded and told her to follow. Do you know why you are here? She asked, and Naruto shook his head negatively. My dad invited Shikamaru and Chuji along with their parents. My dad said something about discussing politics over dinner. She explained, and he nodded silently. He had known something like this would happen sooner or later. He had forced the clones to drill everything into his head. It worked. He knew what to talk about. Politics were strictly politics. As Ino led him into the dining room, he saw that everyone was already waiting for him. So he sat in the chair Ino gestured for him, and she sat next to him. Naruto? Both Shikamaru and Koji asked, completely shocked. Hey guys! He replied, and they both kept staring at him. Before you ask, I am the Senjou clan heir and the Uzumaki clan heir, don't make a big deal out of it, he said, and they only stared some more. So you're pretty much like Sasuke? Koji asked, making Naruto's happy face turn into a scowl. I may have some nobility, but I'm not pompous and bossy like that arrogant idiot, Naruto said, and was surprised when Ino didn't hit him upside the head for disrespecting her Sasuke-kun. Anyway, Inoichi said, and the heads turned to him. Naruto Dano, we requested you presence for 2 reasons. 1, to form an alliance-ship for our clans and to tell you everything we know about Kushina, he said, perking Naruto's interest. The other genin were confused with the last part but kept quiet. Don't I have to be a clan head to form allianceship? He asked, and all clan heads shook their heads no. Once you are the last person in the village from that clan we can discuss these things with you. We even tried Sasuke, but the brat said, and I quote, "My clan is the best and doesn't need any help." Choza said, and Naruto chuckled. That pretty much sound like him. He said just as Ino's mother brought the dinner. Naruto looked around and saw that the time was 6, meaning he still had time before the Anbu was to meet him. The meal consisted of rice, chicken, pork, salads, and you'll never believe it, ramen. All the people were shocked when Naruto ate 16 bowls of ramen. After the dinner, Naruto sat in Inoichi's den with Shikaku and Choza and their spouses. The other were outside either cleaning up and or watching clouds. A silencing jutsu was placed and they talked about endless politics, and it even went as far as suggesting a marriage contract between Naruto and Ino, which the boy blushed in embarrassment. Then Inoichi said it was a joke. So now we find Naruto walking down the road with the Ino-Shikacho formation. All was quiet except for the munches of Koji and his chips. Hey Ino! Naruto called, and his fellow blonde looked at him. Do you train regularly? He asked, and she looked down. I can't train so much, I will get bulky and Sasuke-kun will go after for it. She said, and he sighed with a shake of his head. That's not really important, being a fangirl is not a good hobby, it could get you killed, you also need to eat regularly. When you answered the door for me your body looked a little petite for a kunoichi. He explained. So Naruto, you were checking out my body? She asked with a blush, and he question made him blush as well. How about I give you some tips and whatnot, I can even help you train. He suggested, and she began to think it over. She looked hesitant but shrugged. If it could help her get Sasuke-kun and be a strong kunoichi, she was taking the offer. She nodded to him. By this time they had reached his apartment and he walked up the steps. Them yelled back at her. Meet me at training ground 2 in a week. She nodded and walked off with Shika and Koji, who had been watching the altercation in slight amusement. The next month was going to be one hell of a shit. 1 week later we find Naruto in training ground 2. He leaned up against the stump in the middle of the grounds while his clones were working their assess off. They had completed the books and he stored them in his house. Right now the clones were practicing the following: tree walking and throwing weapons. It was all he had been doing for the past week. He had almost gotten the hang of tree walking, and the weapons throwing was proving to be a little difficult as he had no proper training in it in the past. By now the word of Naruto being the Senju clan heir had reached the ears of the now outraged civilians who, after calming down about being kept in the dark, apologized profusely to Naruto, who waved it off as nothing. This shocked the villagers and shinobis alike to great proportion. Naruto had been beaten, assaulted and all other forms of abuse by the village, and he simply told them it was okay. This convinced most villagers he was definitely not the nine-tailed fox. Others, however, were simply raging about he was the Nine Tails trying to throw the village off of its scent. They raged internally, of course. As the sun beamed down in his closed eyelids he let out a long sigh. Then suddenly the sun was blocked out by a shadowy figure, and before they could talk. "Hello Ino," he said, making her jump back and make a sound that was close to eep. She then glared at her fellow blonde. Naruto opened his eyes lazily and sat up. "How did you know it was me?" she asked. Naruto simply stood and stretched as he worked out some kinks in his neck and back. He turned back to Ino. "I originally come from 2 clans, each of which has a special ability. Senju clan has the wood release and the Uzumaki clan has extreme sensory abilities," he explained, and she only nodded. "Before we start I want to ask you some questions." She nodded. He called over a shadow clone and whispered to it, and then turned around and beckoned for Ino to follow. She looked at his retreating figure and shrugged as she ran to catch up to him. As she reached his side she noticed the distant look on his face. She was about to ask what happened to him when he turned to face him. "Is there something wrong with me? Physically, I mean?" he asked / explained with his azure eyes drilling into her. "I don't understand," she said, and Naruto ran a hand through his hair with a sigh. Why doesn't Sakura like me? I was her friend when no one else wanted to be because of her forehead, after you of course. He said and then continued walking. Ino was looking at him as he walked and she shook her head. She walked back up next to him and grabbed his forearm. He stopped and turned to her. His deep azure blue eyes peering into her pale blue ones. I'm sure forehead will come around after I win over Sasuke-kun. She said, making Naruto snort. She glared at him as she took it as an insult, but Naruto only smirked. What do you really see in Sasuke team? Naruto asked, and Ino placed a hand on her chin and began to think. Nah, just kidding, she was in mock shock. He's mysterious, sexy, smart, and a strong shinobi, and also comes from a prestigious clan. She said, and Naruto only chuckled a dark chuckle at her response. What's so funny? Naruto didn't respond, he simply turned to the clones that were still working and told them to dispel. When they did, the entire air was coarse in smoke and Naruto was standing there only overwhelmed by the knowledge a little. Those meditation exercises worked. As to answer your question as to why I laughed, Naruto said, and Ino turned to him. I am all of those things too, you don't see girls raw in over me. He said, and Ino burst into laughter. Really? You of all people are those things? She asked, and Naruto's smirk yes wider. Let's compare then. He suggested, and she nodded her head almost instantly. Sasuke is mysterious, we don't know why he's always so broody, and it's kind of cool. She said. There are endless secrets you don't know about me, and as for why he's broody, it's because he wants to kill his older brother, Itachi. Naruto explained, and Ino's eyes were wide. That's why? He never says anything at all. She yelled, then Naruto placed a finger in the air. One for me. He said. All right, he's sexy, his body is perfect. Ino said with a smirk of satisfaction. Naruto took her hand and used one of her fingers to trace his whisker marks, making her blush. Cute and sexy, right? He asked, and she only nodded solemnly. He's a good shinobi, he knows a fire release technique, has the Sharingan and can make a clone. She said, smirking. I may not know any ninjutsu, but I know I have at least water release and earth release, I have the wood release, and I can do a clone jutsu 10 times better than the normal clone. Shadow clones are physical clones that can do anything I ask of them, their knowledge is also transported to me when they dispel. He explained, and her jaw dropped. Last one then, he come from a prestigious clan. She said, and knew that it made no sense from the moment it left her lips. Don't answer. She said when he opened his mouth. He shrugged as they reached the lake where the waterfall's water fell into. Ino immediately saw flowers and squealed as she ran over to them. Naruto chuckled at her love for flowers. He followed her and watched as she plucked a flower. Akibara. He said, and she spun round with a shocked expression on her face. Naruto only smirked and sat next to her, looking straight into her eyes. Red rose, it means romance. How did you know? She asked, and Naruto smirked and took the rose from her. I have a small garden home. He explained, and she immediately jumped on him, pinning him to the ground. You have to show me. She squealed, and Naruto shrugged. I don't see why not. How about after training? He asked, and she nodded her head vigorously. Let's start training now. She urged, and got up only for Naruto to pull her back down. Why do you want to become a shinobi? I want to be the clan head of the Yamanaka clan and show Sasuke-kun I'm a great kunoichi, so he'll go on a date with me. She exclaimed, and Naruto got up and walked away. Hey! Where are you going? Home. I can't take fangirls, you want to train with me, get rid of the fangirlism. He said, and was gone. Ino watched shock as he left. Was she a fangirl? Maybe. Fine, if Naruto didn't want to train her, so be it. She got up and left in the opposite direction of Naruto. Later, Yamanaka residence, Konohagakure. Ino walked into the family dinner room with a distant look on her face, which her parents immediately saw and glanced at each other. They watched as Ino sat and placed her elbows on the table. elbows. Her mother warned and she quickly removed them. She then turned to her parents and gave them a weak smile. They noticed this as well and... "What's wrong, Haim?" Inoichi asked his daughter and she removed a strand of hair out of her face. "Dad?" she asked. "Am I a fangirl?" she asked and Inoichi stiffened. "I'm not going to lie, yes." Inada said bluntly, making both Ino and Inoichi drop their jaws. "You study too much about that brat of an Uchiha, we don't even approve of him but let you be to make you happy, but since you brought it up, yes, you a fangirl, you only know one's clan jutsu, you don't train and practically starve yourself." Ino looked down and sighed. Maybe Naruto and her mother was right. Maybe she was a fangirl. "What do you think, Dad?" he asked and received a nervous chuckle from him. "I have to agree with your mom," he said nervously and Ino let a small smile grace her face. Her parents may have been blunt about it but they were right. Fangirls were simply people with wasted talent. She got up from her seat. "Mom, Dad, I'm going to go train, if you need me I'll be at the Senju compound, Naruto offered to train me earlier and I'm accepting," she said and darted up the stairs to get ready. "If that boy only touches Ino inappropriately I'll castrate him with a senbon needle." Inoichi growled, making Inada chuckle at her husband's protectiveness. "Naruto doesn't seem like that kind of child," she said and he huffed and went back to eating. Ino came back downstairs with her ninja equipment and her hitai strapped around her waist. "Later guys!" she yelled only to be stopped by. "Wait!" Inoichi yelled and she spun around to face her parents who were pointing at her dinner. "I'll eat at Naruto's," she said, running out, making Inoichi groan and stand up yelling. "What exactly is she going to eat?" he yelled, obviously thinking something inappropriate for children their age, only to get a smack by his wife who glared at him, making him cower like a dog with its tail between its legs. Men. Later, Senju compound, Kanahagakuer. The Senju compound was a spacious place. It had the main building in the center of smaller ones forming a protective barrier or circle around the main complex. Ino stopped at the gates to see two guards. They looked at her, then at each other. "Naruto-sama said you'd be coming." A guard yelled and opened the gate for Ino, who walked in wearily. She saw many people going about their business, so she shrugged and walked straight to the main complex. "What did he mean Naruto said I would be coming?" she asked, stopping in front of obviously the main building. It was 3 stories tall and way too big for one person. She knocked on the door twice and a man opened the door. He was a butler's suit and had grey hair. "Hello, I am Hisuna, how may I help you?" he asked, making Ino shiver from the depth of his voice. "I came to see Naruto," she said, and the man nodded and told her to follow him. She grew a tick mark, as a lot of men have been telling her to follow them lately. Well, just Naruto and Hisuna, but you get the point. They walked through the house and came face to face with a door. On the door marked the kanji for den and he didn't knock. He simply opened it and gestured for her to go in and left. She shrugged and went in. Naruto was in the center of the room wearing casual clothing as he worked. He was facing the other way. The desk he was at was a complete circle with him in the middle and a space for him to enter and exit. It had endless books on top of books on the shelves. She wondered what Naruto was doing and looked closer. She saw over his shoulder that he was reading about some named Mito Uzumaki. "Hey Ino!" he said, making her jump again. She glared at him for this and he turned around to meet her eyes. He noticed the ninja equipment and leaned back. "So I'm guessing you forgot about Sasuke team." "Kind of," she admitted. "My parents told me that they didn't really approve of him and just wanted me to be happy, so I'm going to return the favor and make them proud of me," she said, and Naruto smiled. "That's what it means to be a shinobi or kunoichi, to put others before you, so, if we're going to start now, tell me about yourself and your skills," he said, and she sat down on the couch a roll from him. "I want name, likes, dislikes, hobbies and dream." "Okay, I'm Ino Yamanaka, I like flowers, shopping, cherry tomatoes, and pudding. I hate sashimi and people who think I'm ugly. My hobbies are shopping and now training, and my dream is to be a good clan head in the future and marry a man who loves me for me," she said, and Naruto smirked. "My name is Naruto Uzumaki Senju. I like gardening, ramen, especially at Ichiraku's. I hate how old man Sandame makes me guess who my father is. I hate Sasuke team and people who judge others. My hobbies are training, finding out hints about my mother, and my dream is to become Hokage," he said with a slight smirk. "How did you know to ask these things?" Ino asked, and Naruto shrugged. "I read in a book that that's what Jonin senseis do when they now meet their team," he said casually, and she nodded. "As for my skills, I know the clone, transformation, substitution, and my clan's most basic attack, the mind-body transfer," she said, and Naruto nodded. "My skills are not much. I know the shadow clone, transformation, substitution, sexy jutsu, and I know how to use my clan's sensory abilities," he said. "What now?" she asked. Naruto smirked. This was going to be fun. 1 week later, Training Ground 2, Konohagakure. Naruto swung his fist and Ino ducked under the punch. She sent a right leg sweep to his legs. He jumped over and back flipped away. He smirked when he saw Ino panting. He was panting as well, but not as much as Ino. She took in a deep breath and charged at Naruto. Naruto smirked when Ino reached in front of him and sent a kick for her side. She smirked as she flipped and jumped over him and swung an axe kick. Naruto brought his 2 hands up in an X and parried the hit. She groaned and jumped away. Naruto took out 2 of his special kunai and twirled them on the hook. Ino's eyes grew considerably at the kunai. She had been hit with of those before and it had stung. She didn't know why, but it did. She glared as he twirled the kunai on his index finger. She took out her kunai, which was the standard ones, and threw them at him. He smirked as he caught the kunai between the holes with the blades of his. Her jaw dropped when she saw his skills with the kunai. She grounded her teeth. She took out 2 more kunai and sent 2, the other 2 she held in a reverse vice grip. She ran towards him at great speed. She kicked his feet from under him, sending him down on his rear. She took a kunai and pressed it against his neck. She smirked only to feel the sharpness of another kunai on her neck. "Yield!" he ordered, and she dropped the kunai. The Naruto on the ground burst into smoke and was gone. Naruto held out his hand and helped her up. "How did I do?" she asked, and Naruto smirked and held out a card for her. She watched it in curiosity. "This is an affinity card that tests the type of chakra you have out of the 5 elements. Test it and meet me back in a week for me to show you the steps," he said. She nodded and gave him a quick hug and was about to leave when, "Hey Ino?" Naruto asked softly, and she turned to meet his eyes. They just stared at each other until Naruto let out a sigh. "I was wondering if you'd like to hang out with me sometime." He blushed. She blushed hard and cleared her throat. "I'd like that," she said. "Pick me up Friday night." He nodded his head and she left. He sighed and sat in the clearing. He finally managed to ask her out. He had had internal battles with himself about asking her out. Over the week they had really gotten to know each other and found out that they had a lot in common. "Yes, the pairing is starting early in the story, but I need it for the plot, please understand." He was cut off from his thoughts when he heard a rustle in the lush green forests. He whipped out 2 kunai and slipped into a defensive stance. He heard the rustles again and sent the 2 kunais into the forest. He heard nothing. As he was the Jinchuriki of the 9 tails, he had excellent sight in the dark from the fox he held as a prisoner. He let out a sigh and sent 2 more kunai only to hear the same thing, nothing. He then mentally face-palmed. He was an idiot. He closed his eyes and channeled his chakra to his ears and nose. He sensed the presence of someone and sent a hail of kunai at them. He was met by silence once again, then a lone figure stepped out. He didn't recognize the man and stepped back. The man walked closer to him as Naruto walked further back. "Who are you?" I am Jiraiya no Sunan, the Gallant, and Gama Senin, and I'm your sensei. That's the end of the first part guys. If you enjoyed then like and subscribe for part 2. This is Maelstrom signing off.